Good to see everybody today, and I'm going to welcome Left Bonnie in a moment. We have a good crowd today. Thank you for the great turnout. It's amazing how much the discovery topic has sort of reemerged as the big deal. And in my mind, Lef, it's what we're seeing out there is there's just sort of an utter chaos in terms of I like to think of it as asymmetric sort of experience. Like you don't know where you're going to find the customer in terms of their sense of the problem or their sense of the solution. Some people are far along on the spectrum. Some people are at the beginning. The possibilities are endless in terms of where you might meet the prospect or customer when you show up, and really a seller, the one size fits all methodology approach seems to be coming up short. Like I call it the illusion of control. Like let's put a process or methodology over the top of our discovery and qualification because we're just trying to retake control of this thing that seems to be out of our control. And I believe like, okay, that's fine. At least there's some consistency, but it doesn't mean it's optimized. And so today we're going to talk about the fact that in fact process and methodology can be an illusion of control. How can though your sellers optimize themselves to identify the right environment, adapt to that environment, and yes, more effectively control the situation, but recognize there's many situations. I guess that's why we're calling it adapt to win today, and why we're talking about it being the modern buyer. And but let's talk about something sellers left have been doing for decades and decades and decades, and how it needs to adjust. So here you are, everybody. Dr. Left Bonnie, the research director at Emblaze, but also the founder, professor at the Florida State University Sales Institute. And I'll let him tell you more about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Glad to be here. And yeah, like Tim said and Amanda said in the introduction, I am a professor in the College of Business, maybe more specifically in the FSU Sales Institute. And for a lot of folks out there who are joining us maybe for the first time and haven't heard about what do you mean a University Sales Institute? You know, there's good news in the sense that there are now universities out there playing in the sales game, training students to be good in sales, doing research on sales, et cetera. And I'm lucky to be at one of those. And we're growing. When I got in the business in 2008 as a newly minted PhD, there were 30 schools roughly playing in this game, and now there's probably closer to 120 of those. And so we're pretty proud of that fact. Now, one of the things that sets us apart, though, I think, is that we are also a research school, and so we have to publish or perish, and we sort of pride ourselves on doing what we think is some pretty insightful research around things like discovery and being better at problem minded sort of focus. And so that takes partnerships. And so we are glad to say we're a partner of Corporate Visions, who is the sponsor of our webinar today. They connect us with a lot of companies, a lot of their client base to help us gather data on some of these research initiatives that we have going. And then Emblaze kind of represents a bit of a place for us to park it. Like once we come up with, hey, here's what we found, and here's some cool white papers or some cool insights. For those of you who may not be familiar, Emblaze is sort of the think tank research house that's affiliated with Corporate Visions that allows us to sort of publish and disseminate what we come up with. So kind of an interesting triangle, interesting set of relationships here. But the thing everyone on the call today should care about is, hey, what we're going to talk about comes from data. It comes from taking a look at some of the different things going on across the world of sales today from a data perspective. Now, I do need to just make another quick caveat here. I am a recovering salesperson. So for those of you who think, oh, ivory tower professor doesn't know what he's talking about, that might be true, but it's not true because I didn't work in sales. So I did spend a little over a decade in sales and sales leadership jobs. But if I go even farther back and sort of talk about what I really wish I'd done, it would have been, hey, I wouldn't be here at all. I'd be 30,000 feet up in the sky because I grew up in an Air Force family. My dad was a pilot. And so our conversations, movies, uh, fun playtime in the backyard was all about, hey, let's pretend we're flying airplanes. And so some of these folks like Chappie James and Chuck Yeager and John Glenn, Neil Armstrong, these were all heroes of mine growing up in terms of who I look forward to. And I just could have sworn I was going to be one of these guys along the way. Now, for some of you, you're like, I can't relate to this. I don't know who you're talking about here with some of these people. So I thought to make this a more relatable presentation today, I would bring in, okay, surely you at least know these two pilots somewhere in your career of having watched Snoopy or Mavericks sail across the sky. You would know who they are. Okay, so I want to make sure I at least connect with a few of you around this aviation discussion. But there's one person that I'm sure no one's never heard of, and very few people. Maybe we should be offering this as some sort of trivia question, Tim. But there was a fighter pilot named Colonel John 42nd Win Boyd, and what makes him sort of famous is he's one of the most decorated fighter pilots in the entire United States Air Force, in the history of the United States Air Force. But what also makes him unique is he never fired a single shot in battle. All of his awards, medals, accommodations, etc., have all come from the fact that he developed systems that made the Air Force better, and he's been recognized by that. And in fact, he went on to work in the Pentagon and helped the entire U.S. military get better at things. So the story of John Boyd is interesting, right? I said he never fought in combat. Sort of, he was between wars. Sadly, if we think through the latter half of the 20th century, he didn't get an opportunity to go to battle. So, at one of his missions or one of his roles was to become a fighter pilot trainer. So he got sent to what is the U.S. Air Force's sort of version of Top Gun, and he sort of made a name for himself as a trainer. In fact, that's where he got the 42nd Win nickname, is he would dare anyone who came on campus that he could beat them in 40 seconds if they went up in the sky. And so he took this bet many times, and the legend is that he won the bet every time. He never lost to anyone in these simulated dogfights. So he gets there, and he gets a reputation as being a great trainer. He really sort of has really good ideas for how to make the fighter pilots better. And so finally, the leadership of the weapons school sort of give him blank slate, like, hey, redo everything. And what do you think we ought to do? And like a good problem solver, he said, let's go back and understand the problem. And he said, the first weakness I see in most of our fighter pilots is we're throwing too much information at them. You know, as the technology of cockpits evolved, and you see all the dials and buttons and gizmos, it was just becoming too much information. Our pilots were becoming overwhelmed, analysis paralysis in the cockpit. Another issue that he noticed as a trainer was pilots were being left to figure out the when-to of different tactical maneuvers. In other words, they would teach them the how to fly certain patterns and certain maneuvers up in the sky, but we didn't do a good job prescribing to the pilots when they should go left versus right or up and down, etc. Okay. Another weakness he saw was that the Air Force was not using enough dope to help pilots get an advantage in the sky. Now, a lot of you might be a little concerned that our military has an acronym called DOPE. But feel at ease here, it stands for data on previous engagement. And what he was observing was, hey, the computers are coming of age. We have data from black boxes. We know what happened. We have battle reports from what happened up in the sky. Why are we not using those to sort of mine what our pilots should be doing going forward? And weakness number 4 was we tend to keep building planes that fly really fast. And let's just make it all about speed. And so we had this real one-size-fits-all approach to how we were designing aircrafts that were getting used. So they said, okay, what should we do about this, John? And this is where he came up with this thing called the OODA loop. Now, some of you might start having a light bulb go off here to go, oh, I have heard of this thing called the OODA loop. I didn't know some guy named John Boyd built it. But the OODA loop was his reaction to those problems on the previous slide. So what he said was, if we can train our pilots to take in the information quicker, figure out what it means faster, make quick decisions, and then act with precision and perfect execution, they'll be more successful. And we kind of got to start it all over again, though, because in a battle, you kind of might run through this, take out a certain plane, and then you're faced with another enemy, and you got to start all over again. So he called them the OODA loops. And he said, hey, in any military situation, planes or anything else, if our folks can run through the OODA loop faster than everyone else, we win. And that's what we should be doing as support personnel in the Air Force, is helping pilots go through this much quicker, much faster. Now, by the way, a little trivia question. On just about every Air Force base in the United States, there will be a road that obviously will be a loop, and it's called the OODA loop, because the Air Force is so passionate about this that they want everyone on the base to sort of be aware of this at all times. That's one of their ways of always reinforcing it, is to have a street on an Air Force base called the OODA loop somewhere on the base. Right? Now, a lot of folks are on the call today going, okay, crazy professor guy, why is he rambling about Air Force folks? What does this have to do with sales coaching, sales support, sales, like what does this have to do with sales organizations? And gang, I think if we write down these 4 weaknesses that John Boyd observed in fighter pilots 50, 60 years ago, I would argue we're facing those today with our sales teams. Think of your sales stack. How much information is flying off computer systems and software systems at our sellers today as they go after a sales pursuit? What are all the different things coming at them? And oh, by the way, that doesn't even count external information coming from customers or things they're hearing about competitors or anything from the outside. They're just inundated with information. And I think one of the things we have to do, like Boyd, is help them figure out what should they really be paying attention to. Another issue is the pilots didn't know the when to, and they were running sort of the same tactics over and over again in all situations. I see this everywhere in sales organizations that we're affiliated with. Unfortunately, this one approach fits all is the norm. It's let's teach this one methodology, and we're going to tell our sellers, do this in every situation that you face. And we've all been in the room before when in a training where someone raised their hand and said, what about in this situation? Does this still work? And really what they're questioning is this one size fits all approach that sales teams are being taught. We need to, I think we're at a good age, a dawn of analytics, where with the help of AI and other tools, we can start to use DOPE. What happened in previous engagements, we can start to scale that, go out and try to get that information at scale and bring it into what should we be doing based on the type of situation we're in. And then obviously marketing has to change their approach too. We can't build aircraft that just fly really fast. We can't build one size fits all marketing support materials. We need these to be adaptive to the situation. So gang, I can back this up, I guess, with a little bit of data. One of the things we did a while back is went out and talked to a couple of thousand salespeople. And we said, hey, in your view, when you think of all the sales and training and support that you get, does it seem to be sort of heavily leaning towards skills and competencies and event-driven kind of things? Or is it all about the missions, like helping you be better in specific situations? And as you can see here, it's skewed heavily toward the, yeah, it's all about just teaching me these skills and these fundamentals to go out and be good in our role. I don't get a lot to help me in the moment, in the mission part of this. And so, Tim, I'll ask you, this is us with data, agree, disagree based on, you interact with a lot of companies out there. Do you see a similar phenomenon?
Yeah, I put words on each end of the spectrum. On the left-hand side, I like to say, this is just in case training. Like, it's easy to set up a catalog and a curriculum and a calendar and say, you should do this on this date, you should do that on that date because you're in this role and you just joined the company and you just get stuff. And then the hope is that in the moment you need it, you remember that stuff. So just in case training on the left-hand side, and then we call it just in time on the right-hand side. Obvious statements now, and as you look at it, but the idea of just in time is like, I need the help when I need the help, when I find myself in some form of deficit. And the deficit's created by the situation. It's like, oh, this is situation A today or this morning, and this is situation B this afternoon, and they're different. How should I work these? And I need just in time interventions to help me point out which of the things I might have learned in the just in case motion are now relevant in this situation, and just those things that are relevant for that situation. And I think the world is evolving. The problem is that really that the technology as well as the content, it was just easier to build and deploy on the left-hand side and check a few boxes versus having this kind of dynamic on the right hand side that you could both execute and measure and observe as you go to continually improve it as well. So this is just, some of it's just like, hey, it just wasn't easy to do the thing on the right hand side, but we're there now. We have plenty of technology. We got plenty of chunky content. And we have plenty of analytics to say this is the situation. So I think right now there's really now it's just change management to get to the right hand side. And I think the data you're about to show is going to be the impetus for people to go, I need to make that move.
Yeah, for sure. So the question that he's maybe alluding to here is, does it matter? Like, hey, do we need this stuff to be pushed to the right in terms of this mission-based or in the moment sort of tailored training to helping me solve this particular situation? We did a correlation between the sales team's rating of sales support and training as not helpful to extremely helpful. And we correlated that rating with the previous question, which, hey, is your sales training being this sort of check the box, or is it this in the moment kind of thing? And the correlation was massive, right? So the sales team appreciates when this thing is the support that they're getting, the coaching that they're getting is in this mission focused more so than in this event focused. So what are we trying to say here? What we're really saying is, hey, how come we don't how come we don't adopt the OODA loop in sales organizations? Because to me, it solves an awful lot of problems where if we agree that our sellers are having to take in too much information on a deal pursuit, how can we teach them to be a little better and sort of focus on the right things in terms of their observation, come up with, hey, what does this all mean for me? Make some decisions around where should I go with this, and then act. This is what we should be doing as sales organizations, whether you work in sales enablement, you're a frontline sales leader, you're the VP of sales, like everything you should be doing should be helping your sellers do something that gets them better at one or all of these spots on the loop. And so when this kind of brings us to the topic for today, though, because when we think about that observe step, what we're really saying is, hey, our people have to be really good at observing what's going on in the world of the customer. And we talk about this in the form of discovery. And so to make this maybe a little interactive for today, I would love to get maybe people's thoughts on, hey, how good are your salespeople at that observe step as it relates to a customer's sort of opportunity and the problem that that customer is trying to solve? So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not very good at all and 10 being they're rock stars, how would you rate your sales team's problem discovery capability? And Tim, I'm going to let you do the math and tell us what the average is looking like here on the chat for this.
So on average, we're over the middle line. I'm seeing 6s and 7s and a few lower numbers. But generally, I am seeing that this group believes that their sales team is better than not at doing problem discovery. And so I think it's interesting that, and I'm just gonna, some people, make sure you open it up to everyone so they can see your scores. So when you comment, not just to host and panelists, comment to everyone. Yeah, so but they're still here to learn, Left. So they must believe there's always an opportunity to get better. But this is a bit. I got one that's this is to host and panelists, so I have to say it because everyone can't see it. They think they're an 8, but they're actually a 2. So, well, maybe
Great.
After everybody might rescore their company after they see what you're about to say.
Well, that's a perfect segue because I do think that is kind of the philosophy a lot of time of sales folks out there in the field. It's like, oh, I'm doing a great job at this, and sometimes we need some data to back up whether that perspective is holding true or not. So we did a study at FSU not too long ago where we had sellers tell us when they were about to head into a discovery meeting with one of their buyers. And when they did, after they left, we sent a survey to the buyer and we said, hey, you just met with this seller on a discovery conversation. Do you mind telling us a little bit about what your problem statement was, what your view of your problem statement was here? And so when we talk about a problem statement, that's a new term for folks, what we mean is sort of all the dimensions of a problem. So when you think about it, it's the what is the problem, who is it impacting, when does it happen, where in the organization is it happening, How bad is it? And have we already thought through some benefits of fixing it? And so each of those elements sort of represents its own little piece of a problem statement. So the buyers wrote that down. Here's what I think it is, right? And so we had them give us the view of the problem. And then we went to the sales folks and we said, okay, seller, you just came out of this discovery meeting. Tell me what you think it is. What do you think the problem is? Who in the customer's organization does it impact? When does it happen, et cetera? And what we were looking for was to, across all those elements, how much match were we getting? And so we asked the sellers to write that down for us. And then what we found is across these 182 pairs of buyers and sellers was they were only aligning about 45% of the time. I'll be generous and just round up half, right? About half the time, or about half of the problem statement was accurate in terms of what the seller said it was versus what the customer said it was, right? In other words, aligned, about half aligned. And this is right after they got through talking to the customer about the problem. So clearly there's something missing here from some of the needs discovery stuff around making sure we ask the full range of questions to get all of that out on this table versus just maybe bits and pieces of it. Now, again, I'm a big does it matter guy. And so we went on to track whether or not out of those 182 pairs, the seller won or lost the deal. And what we found was when the seller lost, and we went back to that problem statement alignment, it was only about 23% aligned. When the seller won, it was about 68%, or almost 3 times more alignment between what the buyer saw as the problem and the seller saw as the problem. Okay, so it matters. Everybody on the call knows it matters. But maybe what we don't know is the level of connection or alignment that we're getting, and maybe it's not quite as good as we think it is out there. Now, there's one more piece of this that matters, and that is sellers also have to be very good at understanding, is the buyer confident in that problem statement? In other words, if the buyer says, here's what our problem is, here's who it's happening to, here's how much money it's costing us, are they sure about that? Right? Because if they're not sure, what they're going to do as they go through their decision-making journey is they're going to change that problem statement. It's going to get altered as the buyer moves through the journey if they have pretty low confidence, low accuracy, low awareness. In other words, if it's a fuzzy problem statement versus a clear problem statement, it's going to change. And in our research,
Hey, Lev.
yeah.
Sorry, Lev, real quick.
Yeah.
Sorry, might have been a bad moment to interrupt, but
Yeah, no, that's okay.
I got a great question here, and I was thinking about this too, because we had so many 7s and 8s and really confident people here that said, yeah, our people are doing great at doing problem discovery. The question is, well, how do you know they're doing great? Because apparently the data says they're not doing as great when you ask the customer. And so my question to the audience is kind of like, how do you know your sales team's doing great at it? Because they tell you they're doing great at it, because it looks like they've got accurate problems from your perspective, or has your customer validated it? And I was thinking about that. I wasn't going to say anything, wasn't going to interrupt, till Ivan sent me a note here. And Ivan said, so was the problem that they did not share their interpretation of the problem to align at the end of the meeting? How come there's this less than half match between the buyer and the seller? And I think that's going to be like the idea of knowing and believing you have identified the problem well, but you don't have agreement from the customer means you don't know if you've aligned it well. And so I just wanted to jump in there with that before we went too far, because I think it was really prescient of Ivan to point that out. Like, how do you end up there when you did good discovery and you don't have alignment?
Yeah. Well, so I think, the experiment doesn't necessarily ferret out what I'm about to say, but I'll say one is, I think a lot of times we're forgetting all of those elements of the problem statement. So if I go back up to the what, who, when, where, I think sellers probably walk out with a what, and they probably walk out with a who, and maybe if they're good sellers, the how bad, and that's it, right? And so there's other aspects of that would, and if you're looking at 6 things up there, you're only at half knowing those 3 things, right? So I think it's sellers tend to go really deep on 1 or 2 of those and do a good job, but they're not going broad.
So we got to get to that, because now all of a sudden the comments are clicking in. How is this different from spin then? And many times clients haven't defined what. and sellers will rush to a solution. Like people are starting to get all into this. So we got to get to your study on problem types and your study on discovery types or characters in the discovery mode. So folks, all of these questions are going to get answered. These are awesome questions. And so here come the answers.
Yeah. So the last thing I'll say about this slide is buyers are going to change, right? They're going to change their problem statement over the course of a complex purchasing decision. And so a takeaway that I hope everybody leaves with today is we have to stop putting discovery as a step in our process that makes it feel like it's this event that we do once. And once we have it, even if we do get a good view of the problem statement, we just work off that for the rest of the decision cycle, when that is changing as many as 3 times over the course of so this has to be a constant. Like we should be starting almost every step in the buyer or in a sales process with a little mini discovery session every single time to make sure that that problem statement hasn't waffled as it's moved through the process, right? So the other thing, what we're getting at here is there's the problem context with a problem. If I put this in simple terms, like a car, like the problem context would be I have a brake problem or I have a transmission problem or whatever. The problem context is the what. But what we have to be sure about is this thing that I like to call the ACA, which is the awareness, clarity, and accuracy. Like, am I aware that I even have this problem? Is it clear to me what's causing it, where it's coming from, what the issue is, right? And am I accurate in that assessment of the problem? Because again, low ACA from a customer's point of view means I'm going to change it down the road. High ACA, when a seller meets with them for the first time, means, hey, this is locked in. This is the problem. This is what I'm sure this is it. I'm sure this is what it's all about. And so the likelihood of that changing down the road isn't as high. Okay. But we don't tend to teach the second half of this. We'll teach the context part, but we don't really do a great job talking about how do I assess this ACA thing. And so to Tim's point, we've done some research on this, and we've kind of let customers not only tell us their problem statement, but we've also measured their ACA, awareness, clarity, and accuracy of the problem. And we've built sort of a continuum that shows, hey, these problems aren't all the same. Even a brake problem on a car they're not all equal, because I could have an unseen brake problem. This would mean my ACA is really low. Not even is it low, it's like 0. I don't even know that my brakes have an issue. Everything seems fine. I have what I would call an unseen problem. Now, gang, this is why when Tim was setting us up earlier and talking about this idea of adaptability, most of us think about adaptability, to me, starting after discovery. I'm going to go and I'm going to ask some good questions. I'm going to get that problem statement. And then based on that, I'm going to adapt what we do next. And what I would argue is adaptability has to start even in discovery. Because if I do the sort of initial questioning of a customer, and it is clear that there is a freight train coming right at them and they have no idea it's there, I have to change my questions. Because gang, spin doesn't work on an unseen problem. Hey, so tell me about your situation. Tell me what problems you have. I don't have any problems. They're unseen. So I can't even answer that question. So I have to take a totally different line of questioning on an unseen problem. Undefined is a problem that, hey, I know something's not right. There's smoke coming off my wheels when I hit the brakes. Not sure what the issue is. Not sure how bad it is. Not sure what the benefits of fixing it are, but something's not right here, okay? Spin works good there. Let's talk more about that. Where do you think the problem is coming from? How bad do you think it might be hurting? I'll do a little homework for you. I'll figure this out, but you have an undefined problem that my value as a seller is to ask good questions to bring clarity to you as a part of that. An unsure problem continuum is, hey, I know my brakes are bad. I know I probably should fix them. And I know I want to be able to stop my car. That's my buying vision here. But I don't know, should I fix it in my driveway or should I take it to a mechanic? Okay? I'm sort of unsure of the conceptual path that I should go down, and I'm still evaluating those paths of how I should fix this brake problem. That's a different set of questions, right? And then finally, unresolved is, hey, my ACA is off the charts. My brakes are broken, they're smoking, they're at the end of their life, and I know for sure I can fix it in my driveway. What I need to know is, should I buy Mopar brakes or should I buy original equipment from Ford brakes, right? I just don't, like, all I need to know is what's the best tool and best set of resources to buy. Different set of questions. So, gang, well, the reason we called this session what we did, this adapting to win sort of thing, and then had the word discovery under that, is because sellers have to be adaptive in the types of questions they're asking based on where they think this customer is falling on this problem continuum. And so this requires a little bit of a new kind of model of discovery in my mind, or at least an ongoing model of discovery that says, first thing I do is just kind of scout the situation, ask some initial probing questions to determine the context of the problem, but also some probing questions around that ACA stuff. How accurate and how aware is the customer of some of these issues? And based on those two things, now I can branch to a set of questions that will help me work through the kind of problem that it appears the customer has. And then last but not least, I got to keep confirming that, because as we said, those fuzzier problems are going to change a lot as the customer moves through the process, right? Now, last thing I want to say about this is, hey, don't get fooled by a buyer who calls you and says, we're ready to, RFP this thing, and we want to know, or should we pick you or not? Because in a lot of our minds, we would run straight to, well, that sounds like an unresolved problem. If the customer's already sending out an RFP, surely they know what their issues and their challenges are. I got to treat this like an unresolved situation. And I would argue we've all been there. We've got an RFP that after we had a conversation or two with the customer, we realized they don't have a clue what their problems are. And they're about to go buy something totally irrelevant, totally not going to solve the problem. Where they are in their buying process does not match where they are on the problem continuum. And so we have to be very careful letting the buyer tell us, oh yeah, I'm here. We got to be good at training our sellers to detect, nah, they really still don't know what their problems are. So I'm not going to play the RFP game. I need to be playing a different conversation around unseen, undefined problems. Right? Tim, any points of
Yeah, we had some
thoughts
questions
here?
coming in, but I think we're going to address those coming up. What kind of sample questions can we ask that can uncover the problem type so that if typing, just like blood typing is so important to many things, problem typing is really important to your next move as a seller, like you choose your branch. How do you nail down what problem type they have in scouting? And then, we'll talk more about some of the branching later.
Yeah. I mean, we could spend a whole, and we do have a whole sort of seminar on this. What are the question types for each of these, right? But, unseen problems, just to give you an example of sort of gauging that is, hey, if I've been working with 50 customers in the healthcare space, and they're all concerned about an upcoming regulation that's going to change how they have to do something in their hospitals, and I go to hospital number 51, and I ask them, tell me a little bit about your problems and challenges, and that regulation doesn't come up at all. Like, well, that would cause me to start to wonder, is there an unseen problem here? And I could even ask, like, hey, well, what about this regulation that's coming up? I know a lot of my other customers are concerned about it. They feel like it's going to cause them problems and challenges. What are your thoughts? And if they're like, hey, we're not paying attention to that at all, it's not that big a deal, well, then hello, that's an unseen problem. And so what Corporate Visions has a really nice sort of program about sharing data and insights with the customer first, and then asking some questions around that. And so that is sort of the right strategy on this unseen thing to scout it out is, let me just sort of throw out a few things we're seeing in the market and see, does this customer bite on any of those? And if not, then hello, that might be unseen, right? And I could go through it. I don't want to take the whole session here and make it be about individual questions for these. But the idea is there really are some smart questions you can ask in that scouting stage that would help me gain not only the context, but also that ACA value that a seller might have.
Yeah, we got some resources on the back end of this that we're going to offer free. So some of that will also be included in there, some samples that you can take a look at.
Yeah, awesome. So another thing when I present this to folks is one of the confusion or points of contention would come up is like, wait a second. So you're telling me not only do we have to talk about context, but also ACA. And then what if my buyer has maybe a couple of different problems and a different level of ACA for each of those? Boy, this seems to get complicated really fast. So how do my sellers do the orient stage, which how do they sort of take all that data coming in from asking these two sets of context and ACA questions and make sense of it? And this is where I would argue we have sort of, this is AI to the rescue and technology to the rescue. And to give you an example, I just wanted to share with a company that had sort of adopted this idea of context by problem context and problem clarity or problem ACA. And so what they did is they sat down and they said, what problems do we solve for customers, right? This was a big capital equipment manufacturer, sells into the healthcare space, right? And they kind of mapped out like, hey, we tend to solve, or when we go into a customer's account, they tend to have one or more of these 8 types of problems, okay? Now, if we think about 8 problems times 4 levels of HCA, levels, boy, this is like 32 different problem types that could exist in the world. But what's interesting is when they started collecting data and they started having their sellers put in, hey, so you asked some questions. What was the context of the problem? So what were the pain points? And then, hey, you've been trained a little bit on this scouting thing. Where were they in terms of the continuum on the ACA part? Unseen, undefined, unsure. And they were just asking those sort of simple questions on a CRM system. And after a few hundred engagements, what they were easily able to do was say, are there patterns here? Let's use the data to say, are there patterns in these? And what they found was they do indeed have patterns here where they have this one situation that they were starting to call just buy another one. And the just buy another one was defined as 4 different pain points, right? And you see pain point 1 having this capacity issue or throughput issue, very unresolved. Customer typically knows they have it, they know all about it. But what they didn't know was the future-proof side. Like, hey, I'm going to solve for today, but what I'm not thinking through as a customer is, if I buy this thing today, what if in 5 years from now I'm already outdated, it's already behind, et cetera, right? And I won't go through the rest of this, but you see there's a pattern, and they were finding this sort of came up over and over and over again. And then if we go on to the next one, they said, we keep looking at this, there's a different pattern of these problem profiles where we have more, again, the future-proofing issue, but this time it's a pain point number 5. It's a footprint issue, right? So this went on, and then finally, they even found they had a third one, which was called, wrong mix, where they were doing sort of the wrong set of processes, wrong set of equipment. Things were, integrated poorly. This is what that pattern looked like. So what I'm saying here, gang, is it's not a world of infinite possibilities. When you track this and teach your sellers to do that scouting thing pretty well, and they map that, hey, it's this pain point and this level of clarity, things start to get pretty easy to say, well, just answer a few questions in the CRM system. We're going to put it in a bucket for you, right? We're going to tell you it's wrong mix, or we're going to tell you it's broken process, or whatever it is that would help you here, okay? And now if I can understand that, now I can also start to prescribe some things we got to go do, okay? I can attack those problems. So when it's unseen, then what I really need to get my seller to do is, once they diagnose an unseen problem, is go run what we call the why change plan. We got to go get that customer to acknowledge that this problem is coming down the path, that regulation is going to be a problem, and you can't sit here where you are today. You got to make a change. And so that's the right message to tack onto the back of the process for the unseen problem. For undefined, it's why should I invest in this? What is it worth fixing? And if we've done a good job baking the problem more in the undefined situation, then we can come back and say, yes, your payoff will be $1 million if you fix this. For unsure, we got to get them to maybe reconsider. What's interesting around 3 and 4 is this is where we start to see something called escalation of commitment. People are starting to kind of get pretty locked into a path. And so as sellers, what we may need to do is pull the customer back a little bit. And I think this is one that Tim is very excited about, because of the data that we all keep seeing that says customers are bringing us in later and later and later in decision-making processes. And so if that's true, then the fact that the customer is going to be more and more committed to a certain path when we show up, that likelihood is high. And so what we have to start thinking about is, how do we train our sellers to maybe get that customer to back up and reconsider what they're thinking about as a solution. And again, we don't talk about that. That's a different set of questions. It's a different set of messaging, but it's one that I don't think sales organizations we're still doing the undefined thing with spin. When customers are past that, they're in a different spot. I don't know, Tim, I put you on the spot with your excitement level
Well,
on this, but
I
agree or
mean, why don't you
disagree?
finish? Yeah, finish the fourth one, and then I'll comment on each of the four, because I think what's happening here, gang, is what you're seeing is that discovery isn't just about figuring out the problem type and coming to agreement on that. It's then how do you remediate that problem type? Like, what's the strategy moving forward? The strategy moving forward from discovery is actually different based on what problem type and how far up this spectrum the client believes they are, and you confirm that they are. So why don't you do number four, and then I'll
Yeah,
come back
sure.
and comment on each of them.
Yeah, so in an unresolved problem, remember the customer has a very clear view of the issue. They know what it's worth to solve it, right? This is called what like I need the best tool. I already know what I have to do to fix this, but I need the best tool. Who has that? And so this is where sellers have to be very good at what we would call a why us sort of message that helps differentiate that, hey, not all tools on the market are the same here. And I need to be very good at making sure the customer sees why we're not like everybody else and best suited to solve the problem here.
Yeah. So that's why what I think is really important here is that one, there's four problem types, and there's really four missions that we have to be able to coach and equip and enable our sales teams to accomplish, and they match to the problem type. And so the ability to understand what problem type you're dealing with and having a good set of questions to dig into that and gain alignment is one part, and then the next part is being able to move to the right then and say, this is how I need to engage that customer. And I think what's clear about these questions is that they're different. And so as Lef was saying, I'll just quickly sort of recap in my vernacular that if the problem is unseen, you've asked a few questions and you're like, wow, they're not even noticing this stuff and we're seeing it all over the place. Your job is to help them build a case, build a vision for how they might change, why they need to do something different, because they might be missing out. And that's the story of why change. Like, you might be missing out on some real opportunity or dealing with a problem that you haven't even seen yet. But as they go up and they're like, hey, I got a pretty good sense of the problem. I just don't know what it's going to take to solve for it. You have to build a business case. You have to say, hey, listen, here's the kind of budget it's going to take. Here's the kind of things that solving this looks like. And when other companies go solving this same problem, this is what their experiences have been and the investments they've made and the value they've seen. If you encounter somebody who absolutely is locked and loaded and believes number three, that they know the problem type and they're really just trying to figure out where they go from here, and you're like, wow, the path they're choosing is not favorable to us, but I could see if I got them to just back up a step or two, we could get them in a favorable place for our opportunity, because we've seen this before. They just don't know that we're the better solution for this. So you're helping them understand that, yes, everything you're saying and everything you've done is right, but there's an additional thing you might want to consider that could really unlock the opportunity. So it's this why reconsider. And it's a different message. It's a different dialogue. It's a different conversation. All ultimately, when you get to the final one where it is kind of RFP land, and you're like, guess what? The problem statement's right and the solution types they're looking for are right, and we can win this. Now your job is to create enough contrast between the others they might be looking at and yourself. It's all about differentiation at the top. So in the bottom, it's all about disruption, and then it's all about definition, and then sort of all about redefining a little bit, and then it's all about differentiation as you go. Those are different missions, and being able to coach and run those is dependent on what kind of and how high quality your discovery is, so that you know the mission that you're going to be encountering. So I hope that you see that it is situational, is not one size fits all. One size fits all seems easier. It gives us an illusion of control, but it's not optimal, because there are other tracks that are out there, and other plays that are being run, that if you don't adapt to them, you significantly reduce your chances of winning them. Again, I think that just a little illustration of each of these hopefully was helpful for folks to see the power of it.
For sure. Thanks, Tim. So last thing I want to say around this is, so I know some of you are like, yeah, but that example you just showed from the medical equipment case study meant that, so you're telling me my team has to go run 4 plays to win that deal, okay? And this is where I want to make sure we go back to thinking about data and how data on previous engagement might tell a different story around that. Because what we did when we were doing this data capture on not only tell us about the problems, but also about what kind they were, we also took a look at, well, let's follow that deal all the way out to completion. And what happens when we sort of attack certain problems over others. And what we found was overall in this situation, we win 21% of the time, we lose 79% of the time. The average value of this and profitability level is 1.2 million at 21%. Okay. Now, what was interesting though is when sellers really took the hammer to pain points 2 and 7, notice how the win ratio doubled. We added 20% or so to the revenue amount, and profitability went up by 50%. Right. But when we took the hammer to pain points 1 and 5, don't win as often, profitability, revenue goes down. Okay. So this is the recipe. The data on previous engagement is telling us we really just have to run 2 plays here. We got to go run the why change around future proofing, and we got to go run the why us around escalation of headcount, and we can win this deal, and we'll win it at higher levels. Let's let the other 2 problems maybe fall away as a distraction on this as we go through. So gang, data to the rescue here on this. And this is, if you're tracking problem type and problem profiles and then win rates and profitability, things start to get a little clearer on what we should do here. And by the way, another benefit of this, again, we've all been on calls or in trainings where what have we heard? Hey, sellers are too fast to be solution oriented. Let's just go in and pitch solutions. Let's do it quick. That's what I'm good at. Gang, if you build your whole organization around problem missions, that solution orientation goes away. And it actually changes me to start thinking about it all from the customer's point of view. And not only what is the problem, but how clear it is from the customer's point of view, changes the seller's entire mindset about what they got to go do to be successful. And if we're collecting data around it, then we're constantly putting it in front of the sales organization that, gang, we're all about solving problems here. We're not about pitching solutions. And it makes a complete mind change across everybody who's involved with helping your sales team, right? And then the last thing I'll say around this is now we can also bring marketing to the issue, right? Because remember, Boyd said we're building planes that are fast, and that doesn't work in every situation. And I would argue marketing is usually building a tool that's being used in maybe one situation. And if we get marketing on board and we say, hey, marketing, we need you to build some tools. I'm going to go back to this slide. We need you to build some tools for the just buy another one. And we need a really good future-proof why change tool. And we need a really good how to handle this headcount issue, but a why we're different around what we do around headcount. If we can have those 2 tools, we're going to go win and we're going to do well in these situations. And so helping marketing understand the situation that we find ourselves in and what we're trying to accomplish in terms of customer mind change or customer perspective helps marketing. Because honestly, I think marketing for the longest time never really understood what are we trying to accomplish out there in the field? Like, how do I support the mission? They couldn't answer that question. And if I bring this new problem focus, new way of thinking about discovery and then action to the table, now marketing has a seat at the table and can help out, right? They see what we're trying to do and they can help, right? So I hope today we've talked a little bit and have shown that, hey, salespeople are overwhelmed, but maybe we can help them a little bit, try to make sense of, this is a better way to think about customer problems and then use some data to show them. But guess what? In this deal, we don't have to worry about some of the problems. Just a couple of them are key. Now we start to let them learn the when to, like when it's this problem, we're going to run this play. So now we can be more prescriptive around that. And hey, we're also bringing marketing to the table in a way that they've never been there before. Now they understand what we're trying to accomplish and they can build tools that can help. This sort of mission-based approach all around problems has an awful lot of benefits to it that folks should be thinking about. But the key is it's got to start with being better at discovery, not only around context, but also around this sort of confidence and clarity that allow us to dictate how we should move going forward. So Tim, I'll turn it over to you. Oh, I do want to end on this though. Actually, let me get to this because Tim will
The
kill me
freebies.
if I don't show the toolkit. Right. So that gang, we've written some white papers around this. So if you're interested in grabbing some of some written versions of this, please scan the QR code and feel free to download some of that stuff. But Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you to either ask us some questions or close us out. Either one.
Yeah, I'm starting to see some folks debating the merits between certain branded named methodologies out there and whether this is the same or nuanced or different. It's I think people are becoming more and more aware of this. Thomas asks a good question or makes a good point. He says when we drive this discovery culture, when it comes to an uncovered customer problem, when they uncover one, they still rush to solution due
Right.
to human nature wanting to help. You brought this up, Lef. And he said, amazing to see, even in sales role plays that they run, when they're competitions, when they know they're being scored on how deeply they discover, they still don't do it well. They still rush to the solution. And we didn't, I don't think we talked a lot about the skimmer approach, the problem-minded approach, the solution-minded approach. You've done some research in the area of the different, I'll just say, discovery archetypes of people, and it's very, very clear that the problem-minded one, the one who puts the time in and the effort, has the better outcomes. And so sometimes it's still got to be about some data that you share with them. And I think there's going to be some of that in these. I download these things. There's more of that detail in there about the different archetypes of discovery folk and how those folks do in terms of performance relative to problem statement alignment and outcomes. So you're going to want to check that out. But any other thoughts you had on that Thomas's observation?
Yeah. So Thomas is right. So just because we know it's an unseen problem and it's in this ballpark, again, we can't run straight to the right to the why us message, right? We just showed that the right play is to do this why change message. And a crucial part of a why change message is helping a customer get past but we're different, right? Because a lot of times when you bring an unseen problem to a customer's attention, you usually have this moment of awareness where the light bulb will go off and they'll go, okay, yeah, maybe there is a freight train out there that I should be thinking about. But what do they do next? They usually try to justify it away by saying, yeah, but we're different. Okay. And so a key step in that why change sort of plan is or message is I got to make sure the customer understands, yeah, you're really not that different. You really are still exposed to this risk and this is still there's urgency here. That's all a play that is not part of the let me just tell you about our solutions play, right? And so this is why you have to really be methodical around when it's this problem. We got to have a set of steps that walks the customer through in a way that's different than okay, I'm ready to buy. Tell me why I should pick you.
Yep. It's a 1-2 combo, right? It's the discovery, you got to get that right, but then you gotta know what to do with conversation number two. And conversation number two has to pick up where discovery left off. If the thing you did with discovery's got them all to the table, and then it's just the usual product centric story versus these mission centric stories, you're going to lose the plot, and you're not going to capitalize on that excellent situational discovery. So
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of questions about incentives and just getting real deals, getting opportunities in the pipe that are for real solutions that are sellable. The incentives and the push is so strong that it's hard to, and the tyranny of the urgent so strong. How do you put a governor on this so that it's done better when those are some of the that's
I
what's
think it's
going
this,
on.
right? I think it's this.
Yeah, and somebody asked
I
a great
think
question about this. Was this from the buyer's or the customer's perspective? No, this is real wins and losses. And
yes.
this is real data that you looked at. So take it away, Lef.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, this should be to answer your question about the urgency and the but I got to try to close every deal. Like why? Like why? I mean, if this thing clearly is falling into this, hey, the customer is totally hung up on pain points 1 and 5. They are pushing us to have to deal with this, and they're not even willing to acknowledge any of the other problems. Look at the win rate. I mean, we just don't have a chance here. We don't solve that problem well, or we don't have a right story around that. right? And so if we're smart, the data helps sellers be smarter to say, look, we got to lose fast if the customer's hung up on 1 and 5. And if we can't change their perspective to 2 and 7, then we got to walk, right? But again, I think that takes data to show a seller. I think just as a manager, we've all been stuck in that, like, listen, I think you ought to walk away from this. And the seller's like, you're nuts. I'm going to chase it because it's a big commission and big dollars. And I think now that we can bring data to the table to go, look, when it's this combination of things, we don't do so hot here. Like, but look, you got 5 other deals over here that match a good problem profile for us. Let's chase those, right? We can win and you'll make more money there. I think that's how you fight it with data.
It's right. Otherwise, it's just opinion, and everybody's got them. Hey, go back to the slide where they can get the information. Thanks everybody for joining us. Like I said, this was a hot topic, and all of a sudden the comments started coming in fast and furious. I couldn't get to all of them. We will download them, and if there's any that need responding, we'll put that in, that deserve some extra TLC in the response. We'll put that in what we send out. So we will send you a link also to these. We'll send you the slides. We'll send you the recording. Thank you for being here, everybody, and giving us a piece of your day. And we trust that you can do something a little better tomorrow than you were doing yesterday. Take care. See you at the next one.
Thanks, Tim.